On a quiet street in the Grapevine Hollow neighborhood, the festive atmosphere turned to panic and horror. Ashley Fallis, a young mother, was being rushed to the hospital in an ambulance, her life hanging by a thread after suffering a gunshot wound to the head. Her parents, who had briefly left the house, were in a state of shock as they returned to find the home surrounded by police and paramedics. Just hours earlier, the house had been filled with joy and celebration. What had happened on this New Year's night? Only one person could have the answer: her husband, Tom, who was in the room at the time of the tragedy. But his version of events was raising more questions than it answered. Ashley's family was convinced they knew the truth, yet investigators faced numerous contradictions and strange details. The mystery behind the doors of that house went far deeper than anyone could have imagined. Early that morning, on January 1st, 2012, 28-year-old Ashley Fallis was taken to the hospital with a gunshot wound to her head. Ashley's family immediately believed they knew what had happened. To them, it was obvious that only one person could have been involved: her husband, Tom. He had been in the room with Ashley when the gunshot was fired. Known for his quick temper and controlling nature, Tom was the primary focus of suspicion for Ashley's family. However, for the police, the story was not so clear-cut. Contradictory evidence was found at the scene, requiring a thorough investigation. Witness statements kept changing, and Ashley's past proved to be just as complex as her present. Years would pass before new details emerged, casting a different light on the events of that night. The festive evening that began on December 31st, 2011, was supposed to be calm and family-focused. Tom and Ashley Fallis hosted a New Year's party at their home on Zinfandel Street. Guests danced, drank, and celebrated. Tom and Ashley seemed like a happy couple. Just an hour earlier, they had been dancing together, looking lovingly at one another, much to the delight of their guests. But everything changed as midnight approached, when Ashley announced she was going outside with her relatives, which angered Tom. The argument erupted suddenly in front of Ashley's family, who were the last guests remaining at the house. Tom began yelling at Ashley and her relatives, who tried to defend her. When their attempts to mediate failed, the relatives decided to leave, following Tom's demand. Slamming the door, Tom retreated to the bedroom. Ashley's parents also decided to leave, leaving the couple alone. A few hours later, tragedy struck. Tom was frustrated by Ashley's family's involvement in their personal lives. He felt Ashley shouldn't have gone outside with her parents, especially after they had been drinking throughout the evening. He demanded that Ashley's parents leave. After they were gone, the tension between the couple only grew stronger. Once the guests had left, Tom and Ashley were alone, and the argument reignited in the bedroom. Tom claimed that their fight was rooted in long-standing issues. Ashley, however, insisted she would live her life the way she wanted, regardless of his opinions. Tom accused her of being influenced by her family. Standing by the closet as he changed into pajamas, Tom said he heard Ashley handling the gun kept under the mattress. Tom tried to ask her what she was doing, but before he could finish, the shot rang out. Emergency services arrived at the scene in the early morning hours of January 1st, 2012. The police called in investigators from the Colorado Bureau of Investigation following allegations from Ashley's family. Her parents, Jenna Fox and Joe Redan, immediately accused Tom of being responsible for what had happened, citing his anger and aggression earlier that evening. At first glance, the evidence at the scene suggested Ashley had taken her own life. However, investigators noticed details that raised doubts. Crooked picture frames on the walls and items scattered across the floor hinted at a possible struggle before the gunshot. Divorce papers left unsigned on a dresser seemed to confirm reports of tension in the marriage. Ashley and Tom had met in the spring of 2007 through an online dating site. Ashley was outgoing and full of energy, and Tom quickly fell for her. Ashley was already a mother to 2 daughters from a previous marriage, and their relationship moved quickly. A year after they met, the couple had a son, and just 2 weeks after his birth, they got married. In 2010, Tom adopted Ashley's daughters, and the family began living together. However, By the end of 2011, tension within the family was growing. Ashley's older daughters were 9 and 6 years old, and their youngest son had just celebrated his 3rd birthday. The boy had been diagnosed with hydrocephalus, which required several surgeries. The stress of his condition took a heavy toll on Ashley, who was struggling to balance her responsibilities as a mother with the difficulties in her marriage to Tom. These challenges created a tense atmosphere, setting the stage for the tragic events of that New Year's Eve. In 2010, Ashley Fallis was terminated from her position at the North Colorado Medical Center. The official reason given was insubordination, with reports citing aggressive behavior. Although she filed a lawsuit for wrongful termination and won a settlement, the legal victory did little to resolve her other challenges. The following year, she began a brief affair with a high school sweetheart, which further strained her already fragile marriage to Tom. During the same period, Ashley sought help from a psychiatrist. She was prescribed medication to reduce anxiety and stabilize her mood, as she had been experiencing up to 4 or 5 panic attacks per week. These struggles placed a significant strain on her relationship with Tom. While Tom was aware of her affair, he chose not to pursue a divorce. The divorce papers later found by investigators in their bedroom were drafted by Ashley herself back in 2009, during a time when the couple had considered separating due to conflicting work schedules. However, they ultimately decided to stay together and work on their relationship. In the months leading up to the tragedy, Tom claimed that their relationship had started to improve. He had secured steady employment with the Weld County Sheriff's Office, working as a corrections officer. Meanwhile, Ashley found her own way of coping with life's difficulties. She began speaking at conferences, sharing her experiences raising a child with hydrocephalus, and offering support to other parents in similar situations. A few weeks before New Year's Eve, Ashley took a home pregnancy test that came back positive. This was a shock, as she had undergone a sterilization procedure after the birth of their youngest child to prevent future pregnancies. Despite the odds, Ashley believed she might be pregnant. To protect the potential baby, she stopped taking her anxiety and mood-stabilizing medication. However, on the day of the party, December 31st, 2011, just hours before guests arrived, Ashley began her menstrual cycle. A second pregnancy test showed a negative result, which dealt an emotional blow to both her and Tom. That day had begun with a discussion about whether it might still be possible to reverse the sterilization procedure and try to have another child. Ashley's mother had originally suggested the procedure years earlier, but now the decisions were entirely theirs. Both Ashley and Tom expressed a desire to have another baby, and the sudden turn of events created significant emotional tension. All of this formed the backdrop to the events of that evening. The party at Ashley and Tom Fallis's home was lively. Despite the emotionally draining day, Ashley made every effort to appear cheerful. She drank, danced, and embraced her loved ones. According to her parents, Joe and Jenna, Ashley seemed happy and strong, just as she always did. They found it hard to believe that she would have willingly left her family behind. But Tom claimed that behind Ashley's outward calm lay deep emotional struggles her family wasn't aware of. Investigators paid close attention to Tom's version of the events that night. His interview began with a recounting of the day, how the negative pregnancy test result had set the tone, and how a small disagreement escalated when Ashley decided to go outside with her relatives. The argument spiraled into a discussion about Ashley's tendency to take her mother's advice too often. Tom said he didn't want to continue arguing and just wanted things to settle down. During Tom's police interview, investigators noticed scratches on his neck and chest. These marks raised suspicions as they could have been evidence of a struggle. Tom explained that he had recently shaved his chest for the first time and scratched his skin due to itching, which caused the red marks. As for the scratches on his neck, he said they could have been caused by stress. The questioning grew more intense as the interview continued. Tom felt that he was being accused of a crime and insisted on his innocence. He maintained that he did not shoot Ashley and that he wasn't in the room when the gun went off. Meanwhile, investigators were questioning neighbors and examining the home. A neighbor, Chelsea Origo, reported hearing Ashley shout, "Get off me," moments before the gunshot. This account contradicted Tom's claims. When investigators asked Tom about the shouting, he denied it and said he never forced Ashley to do anything against her will. He explained that he simply asked her to stop taking advice from her mother, as it was causing tension in their marriage. Investigators pressed him further, pointing out that the wound on the back of Ashley's head made it unlikely she could have shot herself. Tom demanded tests for gunpowder residue on his hands to prove his innocence. He also insisted that Ashley's hands be tested to determine whether she could have fired the gun. Despite his explanations, investigators remained skeptical due to the strange circumstances and conflicting evidence. While Tom was at the station, Ashley Fallis was in the hospital where doctors fought to save her life. Tragically, a few hours after her admission, they announced that she had passed away. When Tom learned of her death, he was devastated. He claimed that when he held her in his arms after the incident, he saw her breathing and believed she had a chance to survive. After 3 hours of questioning, investigators had not obtained a confession from Tom, but they also could not rule him out as a suspect. Tom became increasingly agitated, maintaining his innocence and repeatedly stating that he could never harm his wife. 4 days after the incident, Ashley's death was officially ruled as a voluntary act. The medical examiner concluded that her death was self-inflicted. The case was closed. Shock and disbelief. They felt that the investigation had been rushed and that Tom had received preferential treatment because of his job in the county's corrections system, which they believed influenced the investigation's outcome. However, Tom's role in a separate law enforcement agency unrelated to the investigation made it difficult to prove he had any connections to the detectives working on the case. The Colorado Bureau of Investigation was brought in almost immediately to ensure objectivity. Still, mistakes were made. Tom was not separated from potential witnesses at the scene, a violation of standard protocol. Additionally, his hands were not covered to preserve potential gunpowder residue, which could have served as crucial evidence. Ashley's family criticized the way Tom's interrogation was handled, arguing that 3 hours was insufficient for the primary person of interest in a case involving a suspicious death. They believed investigators did not seriously consider Tom a suspect until Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joe, insisted on it. Only after their persistent demands did detectives adjust their approach. But even then, the investigation remained superficial. Ultimately, Tom was allowed to leave. After the tragedy, Tom took the children and moved to another state, Indiana, to be closer to his sister. He enrolled in college to pursue a bachelor's degree and appeared to be trying to start fresh. Meanwhile, Ashley's parents, Jenna and Joe, refused to back down. They reached out to the media, calling for justice. In interviews, they described Tom's short temper and emphasized that Ashley loved life and would never have willingly ended it. It was reporter Justin Joseph who uncovered a significant new witness: 17-year-old Nick Glover, a neighbor of the Fallis family. Nick revealed that on January 1st, 2012, he was home with friends when he saw emergency vehicles arrive at the Fallis residence. He also claimed to have heard Tom tell Ashley's parents, "I shot my wife." Furthermore, Nick said he shared this information with Detective Michael Yates during an interview, but there was no record of his statement in the police reports. The absence of documentation raised new allegations against law enforcement, suggesting possible corruption and a cover-up. It was suspected that Detective Yates had intentionally ignored this critical testimony to protect Tom. In April 2014, more than 2 years after Ashley's death, the Evans Police Department reopened the case. Fresh allegations included claims that Yates had omitted key evidence and altered a witness's testimony to support the narrative that Ashley had taken her own life. Law enforcement officials denied any favoritism, stating that the investigation had been conducted fairly. On November 18, 2014, Tom Fallis was arrested near his home in Indiana. Despite being charged with second-degree manslaughter, he continued to maintain his innocence. The case, which had gained significant public attention largely due to Justin Joseph's investigation, left many questions unanswered. For example, bruises on Ashley's legs sparked speculation about a flashlight found at the scene, which some believed might have been used during an altercation. However, it was later revealed that the flashlight belonged to an officer who had attempted to provide first aid and was unrelated to the crime. The prosecution argued that during a confrontation, Tom seized the Taurus 9mm handgun that Ashley kept under the mattress, pressed it to her head, and fired. He then lowered her body to the floor and called emergency services. At the trial, Ashley's mother, Jenna Fox, testified that Tom had acted aggressively at the New Year's Eve party, using harsh language that led to a conflict. Tom denied these allegations. Later during the trial, Jenna mentioned that there was a history of mental health issues in the family. Ashley's grandmother and uncle had taken their own lives. The prosecution used this as evidence to support their theory that Ashley may have willingly ended her life. However, Ashley's psychiatrist testified that as of December 2011, she showed no signs of depression. The defense later presented information that Ashley had been seeing 2 psychiatrists and a therapist simultaneously, which resulted in her receiving overlapping prescriptions. Forensic expert testimonies about the crime scene were contradictory. Dan Gilliam, who had spent hundreds of hours analyzing evidence, argued that Tom could not have shot his wife. According to Gilliam, individuals who fire weapons in a fit of rage rarely stop after a single shot. Despite his conclusions, Gilliam was called as a witness by the prosecution. Another expert, Jonathan Priest, reviewed the case materials and visited the crime scene. He concluded that Tom had been very close to Ashley when the shot was fired. Priest reasoned that if Tom had been farther away, there would have been more blood spread throughout the room. His analysis was based on the timeline of when Tom reached Ashley and began providing assistance, as documented by the first responders. The prosecution used this argument to challenge the defense's claims. The prosecution alleged that Ashley's emotional struggles were exacerbated by her unsuccessful attempts to conceive. An autopsy revealed that after a 2-ball ligation, she could have potentially become pregnant, but at the time of her death, she was not pregnant. However, Ashley reportedly believed she had been pregnant 3 times in the 9 months leading up to her death, which added to her emotional distress. Psychiatrists at the trial highlighted how these circumstances might have significantly impacted her mental state. In April 2014, 2 years after Ashley's death, the Evans Police Department reopened the investigation. New allegations surfaced against Detective Michael Yates, who was accused of excluding critical evidence and altering witness testimonies. Law enforcement officials continued to insist that the investigation had been conducted fairly and impartially, dismissing claims of bias. Nick Glover testified that on the night of Ashley Fallis's death, he overheard Tom tell his parents, "I shot my wife." This statement became a pivotal part of the prosecution's case, especially after Nick's friend, Chelsea Origo, gave her own account. Nick's mother, Kathy, claimed that Chelsea had also heard Ashley shouting, "Get off me!" However, during the trial, Chelsea stated that she could not recall the argument clearly because she'd consumed too much alcohol that night. Nick, on the other hand, insisted that he clearly remembered the events of that night, emphasizing that such a confession was unforgettable. His claims drew the attention of investigators, and Detective Michael Yates, who had interviewed Nick on the day of Ashley's death, came under internal review for failing to document this alleged confession. However, the investigation found no misconduct on Yates's part, and he maintained that Nick had never made such a statement to him. During Nick Glover's cross-examination, defense attorneys highlighted several inconsistencies in his testimony. They pointed out that after Tom's alleged confession, Nick continued to maintain a friendly relationship with him, participating in family activities, including camping trips and Christmas celebrations. When questioned about why he acted this way, Nick responded over 90 times with, "I don't remember." Later, former Weld County Sheriff's Deputy Chris Graves also came forward, claiming he had heard Tom confess. According to Graves, he arrived at the scene and heard Tom shouting, "I can't believe I shot her. I can't believe she's dead." However, the defense pointed out inconsistencies in Graves' account. The crime scene was crowded with personnel from multiple agencies, family members, and neighbors, yet no one else reported hearing Tom's alleged outburst. Graves also did not detain Tom at the scene, explaining that it was outside his jurisdiction. Additionally, the defense noted that Chris Graves had not filed any reports about his statements for 3 years following the incident. He was later dismissed from the sheriff's office for dishonesty, further undermining his credibility. These factors cast doubt on the prosecution's narrative. Many physical pieces of evidence also failed to support the prosecution's theory. Gunshot residue tests conducted on Tom's hands showed no traces, while residue was found on both of Ashley's hands. Scratches on Tom's chest, which might have indicated a struggle, contained no traces of Ashley's DNA. Likewise, nail scrapings from Ashley revealed no DNA from Tom. These findings raised serious doubts about the claim that there had been a physical altercation between the couple before the shot was fired. Tom Fallis chose not to testify in his own defense. The trial lasted several weeks, during which more than 40 witnesses were called to testify. The defense's closing arguments focused on Ashley's mental health and the significant challenges she had faced in the months leading up to her death. Repeated pregnancy tests, her son's illness, prescription medications, job loss, and an affair. According to the defense, these factors could have contributed to the tragedy. A surprising development during the trial was the introduction of Ashley's alleged farewell letters. In these letters, she apologized to Tom, referred to herself as a failure, and wrote that she could no longer continue living. Ashley's family expressed doubts about the authenticity of these letters, as they had only learned of their existence years after her death. Her relatives claimed they had never seen any signs that Ashley might have written such letters and believed they were fabricated. After 3.5 hours of deliberation, including a 1-hour lunch break, the jury reached its verdict. Tom Fallis was found not guilty of second-degree manslaughter and all related charges. The decision was a devastating blow to Ashley's family. Her parents, Jenna Fox and Joe Ragwin, firmly believed in Tom's guilt and filed lawsuits against the Evans Police Department, claiming that investigators had concealed or falsified evidence. They argued that Nick Glover's 2012 testimony had been ignored, and that other officers who might have overheard Tom's alleged confession remained silent. Ultimately, their lawsuits were dismissed. Despite the acquittal, Ashley's family refused to accept the outcome and remained convinced of Tom's culpability. However, they managed to maintain a relationship with the children, securing visitation rights that allowed them to stay involved in their lives. Meanwhile, Tom Fallis continues to face financial challenges due to legal expenses and is working to rebuild his life while pursuing his education. Following the tragedy, the children remained in Tom's care. He moved them to another state to start over and be closer to his sister. He explained to them that their mother had passed away in an accident, but plans to share more details with them when they are older. Despite all efforts to uncover the truth, the case remains shrouded in uncertainty. Questions linger, and each answer seems to generate more doubt. The story of Ashley Fallis is one of those cases where the line between truth and deception becomes blurred, leaving behind only shadows of suspicion and unresolved mysteries.